everybody. We've got a great class for you today. We have Kelley Lynn, and we are going to be talking about the process of grief. And so I need for you to text and tag and share this, like right underneath this video, there's a little share it on your Facebook page, share it with your friends, share it wherever you can. We're live at whenyouneedafriend.com, Facebook and YouTube. So do your part to get beyond the algorithms that are trying to keep this information down. So I'm going to start the record button so that we can start the class. Here we go. So as you know, this is all about being present in the moment. We are about taking ownership for our lives, spirit, mind, and body. So today you're going to be razzle-dazzled with Kelley Lynn. So fasten your seatbelt, get ready to get in the moment, and it's time to learn and time to dance. Here we go.
The Lillian McDermott Show.
We love, we fear. Bridges we burn, we make mistakes, then we live and learn. When life gets tough, and it seems like your best ain't good enough. If you're in need of hope, you know where I'll be right here, right here. And when you need a friend, you can count on me. I'll be right here, waiting for
you. This is the place you can always turn to when you need a friend. The Lillian McDermott Show. To reach out to Lillian, visit her on the web at whenyouneedafriend.com. Now let's all learn together. Here's Lillian McDermott.
Hello, my listening and viewing friend. It's so nice we can meet each other on the air on this beautiful, best day ever. And for those of you who are tuning into the classroom for the first time, please know I've been waiting for you. This is a safe place where you can go to when you need a friend. It is my commitment to provide natural ways to heal, and it is my mission to make awareness, responsibility, and truth a part of our everyday life. And I hope you, my listening, as well as my viewing friend, will feel empowered to embrace a new truth and live the life of your dreams. Now, as you know, it's never a good time to lose someone you love. Never, ever, ever. And sometimes the void that it leaves behind seems like it will never be filled. That hole could never be filled. Well, Kelley Lynn, who is a comedian, I don't know if she's a former comedian or she's still a comedian, but she's pretty funny. Well, her life changed when her husband, and originally I said she was 46, but he was 46, she was 39. We changed that. All of that is all changed. But she was young when she lost her husband. And so she became a widow. And so how do you deal with something like that? Some of you are grieving the loss of a child. Some of you are grieving the loss of a marriage. Grieving has a process. And so I recently saw Kelley Lynn on her TED Talk, her world famous TED Talk, because I was looking at grieving. I wanted to do a class on grieving. And finally, after all this time, we finally get her to come into the classroom because, you know, especially with the holidays coming up, how do you grieve so that it will liberate you? Because they say that time heals all wounds, but I tell you, time heals nothing. What you do with that time is the most important gift you can give to yourself and those you've lost. And since it is our sole purpose in life to give and receive love and knowledge, I am grateful that Kelley Lynn is here to do just that. Welcome to the classroom, Kelley Lynn.
Thank you so much. I love your jamming intro there. I was dancing.
I saw you. Yeah, that was written for me many years ago, and it serves its purpose. So I'm glad that you were jamming with me, and I hope everybody else is getting their exercise, their chair dancing, or whatever they're doing too. So share a little bit about your background and what got you interested in grief and doing a TED Talk, or even being open to explore how to talk to others about grief.
Yeah. Well, I never in a million years thought I would be doing a TED Talk about grief. I never thought I would be spending my life talking about grief to people. or helping others through grief. I never thought I would be a widow at 39. Never, ever, ever. So all of that happened. And, as a result of that happening, it was my way of coping. So I grew up in small town Massachusetts, and I was always into acting and comedy and performing and writing and just kind of everything creative. I did all the little community theater plays and stuff growing up. And I moved to New York City when I was 18 and went to college. I was a theater major. I graduated with a BFA in performing arts. And then I taught at Adelphi University in New York City for 16 years. And while I was there in New York City, I met Don Shepard, and he was a beautiful, wonderful, lovely man. And we met kind of by accident / fate, however you choose to see it. It was in a music chat room online. And this was in 1998. So it was, a long time ago, and it was not the norm to meet online. It was not a dating site, or there weren't any dating sites, I don't think, back then. And it was a music chat room where you would type in lyrics to songs from the 1980s. And I was a 1980s child, so I loved it. And so I went in there one night, and there was this other person in there, and we started chatting, and we were typing back and forth for 5 hours.
Wow.
And yeah, it was like I knew him forever. I just had this instant connection where we became friends. And he was in Florida and I was in New York. And so there was no expectation for anything. We were just chatting and we're having fun with each other. And we kept talking every single night online and then on the phone. And it turned into this beautiful friendship. And then it took us about 3 years to meet in person. And so he came to New York finally, flew to New York. We met and we fell in love.
Wow.
And yeah, it's a pretty cool story. And he moved to New York City to be with me, actually New Jersey, which, about 6 minutes outside of New York City is where we technically live. And we were married 4 years and 9 months, and we had a typical kind of struggling financially, shared an apartment, shared a crappy little car. And, we both, made very little money, and we're just kind of living paycheck to paycheck. He was a paramedic, and I was doing my professor thing and also going on acting auditions and stuff. And one day he got up and went to work, and it was an ordinary Wednesday, and he never came home. And I was woken up by a ringing phone over and over again, and it was the hospital down the street, and they just left me a message, and it said, "We have your husband." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean you have my husband?" I called them back, and they just kept saying, "We have your husband. You have to get here right away." And a little part of me knew what they meant, because being married to a paramedic, he had always told me that if it's something traumatic and sudden like that, like if somebody dies or gets in a car accident or has a heart attack or something, they can't tell you over the phone.
Oh, no.
So they have to tell you in person. So they wouldn't tell me over the phone. And so they just kept saying, you have to get here. Can we get you a cab? How can you get here? So I did take a cab to the hospital because he had the car. And I got there, and a bunch of nurses and doctors came at me and, put me in that tiny little room where they give you the bad news and told me, your husband had a heart attack, and we're sorry he didn't make it. We did everything we could, and, just all those little voices, and my life changed forever. And I never thought I would be someone who was, talking about grief or anything like that. But what I ended up doing was taking what I was already doing, because, I was a comedian in New York City, and I was getting on stage all the time, and I was doing stuff about life, material about life and just observations and things like that. And so my comedy became about grief, and it became about, what it's like to lose your spouse or somebody you love in the middle of your life, and all the funny things that happen after that. The death itself is not funny. It's nothing funny about that, but it's the way people react to it, the things people say to you, the red tape issues you have to go through as the widow,
Mhm.
of someone who dies. There's all kinds of absurdity and comedy in that. And so I started getting on stage and talking about it and writing about it. And that became a blog and a book and a TED Talk. And the TED Talk really came from the idea that of what I just believe, which is that the way we treat people going through loss is terrible. We tell them to move on. We tell them to get over it. We tell them to put that behind us. And these messages, I think, are awful and cruel. And, we kind of put people in this place where they feel like they have to be ashamed for loving somebody that died.
Yeah, yeah. And how long is long enough? I mean,
Right.
that is so individualized. And I have to tell you, when you're talking about this, it always takes me to the moment. I have a dear friend at the time. I was going through becoming a certified life coach at the time, and of course at that time I had my radio show, and her son, she and I had gone through the experience together. There's retreats and stuff, and her son went through it, and he was cleaning up his act, and one day they found him dead. He was a drug addict that was in recovery, and was cleaning out his place, and saw one more hit of whatever it was that ended up stopping his heart, and they found him, and they had him on life support, and it took a long time. I remember we did a show on addictions in honor of Lennon, and while we were doing the show, we got the call that he had finally taken his last breath when they removed him from he lasted like 10 days off the ventilators.
Right.
And it was a very traumatic. So we went to the memorial service, and there was a line, and I saw my friend, and she and I had this connection, and when I listened to the woman that was before me, and she said, "I am so sorry Lennon died." And she said, without skipping a beat, "Oh, my son's not dead." Immediately, I thought, "Oh no, she is whacked out of her
Right.
mind." That was my
Right.
first thought. But what followed was one of my greatest learning experiences when it comes to death. Was at that moment, she said, "My son did not die. He ascended."
Yeah.
And when she said that, I just, like, in my mind, it's like, I can't look at death again the same way. So
Right.
what was it for you? What were some of the things in your life that people were telling you that are big no-nos for us to learn about today?
Yeah, so it kind of started immediately. It starts immediately, or it did for me, and most people I've spoken to who have been through a loss, same for them. At the funeral, at my husband Don's funeral, I had people telling me, I had this woman come up to me and she said, "Today you grieve, tomorrow you go out there and find a new man."
Oh my God,
Isn't that horrible? And
it is.
and I was like, "Really? Tomorrow?" I mean, that seems a little soon. And it's comical now, but it's stuff like that that's comical now. But that day I was horrified by
Yeah.
that just the idea that somebody would even think that that would be on my mind the day of my husband's funeral. I mean, it's just, and it's that mindset that we have as a society. I think, just the whole idea of, you have the funeral and then you're supposed to put it behind you, and the funeral is supposed to give you closure, and this whole thing about closure. And I just think it's just not true. It's something, when you lose a spouse or a partner, that's something that changes your life forever. It changes you forever. And what I believe is that eventually, once that pain isn't so raw anymore, and once you kind of make those shifts in grief, where you're at a place where you have more joy again, at that point, it's really up to you how the death changes you. And you can build a new life, and you can have joy, and you can have all of those things. You still miss them, you still love them, and that's forever. That's not going to go away. Why would it? So the messages that are terrible are just the move on, the let go. And something my grief counselor told me early on, which really saved me, kind of like that light bulb moment you had with that statement about ascending, is she told me, Kelley, you don't ever have to let go. You don't have to let go of Don. And I said, I don't, because everybody was telling me I did. And she said, no, that's not the goal here. And I said, okay, what's the goal? And she said, the goal is to change your relationship with Don into something that makes sense now that he's not here on earth physically and you are. She said, his life ended, but your relationship never ends. It just shifts into something different. And once I got that in my head, once I realized I can still live in a world where Don Shepherd exists, and he exists in my heart and in my memories and in our stories, and that our love story matters, and that I can use that love story to kind of shape forward my own life and to help others do the same, and use it as inspiration, then I could be excited about life again.
What a great, a good counselor is sometimes hard to find, but it was
very hard.
Great advice. And I know that you're in the process of becoming a grief counselor.
Yes.
So I'm sure that just like with Cynthia, with me,
right.
I'll take that, you'll take that with your people that you are working with as well.
Absolutely.
Very powerful words. And by the way, for those of you who are watching live, you're welcome to ask your questions. If you have any questions for myself or Kelley, type in a queue, ask your question, and we'll get to it. Kelley has engagement afterwards, so we're not going to have too much time. If there are questions left over, we'll have a teacher's pet corner. But if we don't have the questions, then we will just end the broadcast then. But if you have, this is such a powerful and important conversation to have, because many of us have had losses, and sometimes and Kelley, some people haven't had a loss, but they treat the loss as if it was an end all be all, that there's no tomorrow. And we can take this adapting from what we're learning today with whatever situation you find yourself in, because grief is grief, but depending on what kind of grief it is, it may have a different tilt to it. Would you say that is a true statement, or would you say that there's something and something else?
Yeah, I would say that's very true, because grief is grief. Everyone has grief. Everyone will experience grief. Everyone will experience grief through death. Everyone will lose people they love, because we're human beings and human beings die, unfortunately. So we will all go through it. But there are also other kinds of grief besides the death of somebody you love. There's losses of dreams. There's losses of jobs. There's losses of, people losing their homes, people losing divorce, loss of a marriage, money, all kinds of things. And they're all extremely valid. And for the person going through whatever that loss is, that may be their biggest loss. And for them, that may be the biggest thing they've ever dealt with. So for them, it's devastating.
Yeah. Well, you hear about the stages of grief, whether it's 5 or 7 or 20. So everybody's coming up with so many different, but typically I've learned about the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So how did that go through with you? And how were you able to take that into writing your first joke without bursting into tears?
Well, my first joke came sort of accidentally when the comedy community that I was a part of at that time, when my husband died, I was living in the New York City area, and the comedy community sort of rallied around me. And, the comedians, Elaine Boozler, who's,
love her.
You do? Oh, good.
Yes,
I'm glad you know who she is.
Yes.
Well, she's a friend of mine. And when my husband died, she said, let's put on a comedy show. You need money. This was shocking. You had no idea this was going to happen, and you're broke, and let's do like a benefit show for you. And she said she would roast my husband. She would do like a roast of him, even though she didn't know him. And she would headline a show in New York City, and I would get up and do comedy at,
How
and talk
nice.
about grief. And that's what we did. We did a comedy show at Gotham Comedy Club in New York City, and tons of people came out, and Jim Gaffigan came out and did a little cameo as well
Wow.
as Elaine. And it was so amazing. And so that night sort of started my getting up on stage and talking about it, and I realized how much it helped me to do that, and also how much it helped other people who were writing me afterwards and saying, oh my God, this is so great that you're talking about this and that you're telling the truth about death and grief and making it funny. And so that's sort of how that happened. And I've continued doing that at widowed conferences and places like that, where it's very appreciated.
I can't imagine.
I
Even
know.
writing my first joke, but even if you laugh, because I was watching laughter yoga,
Yep.
and I was looking at this video with laughter yoga, and it was for people that had a disease, and they would say their name, and then they would laugh, and then they'd say, I have terminal cancer. And they were laughing, and I'm like, wow, I know that some people laugh, but then they go home,
Yeah,
and depression sets in,
sure.
and they isolate themselves. But there's a dual personality. How much of that did that happen to you? Did you go out there and write these jokes, or did the jokes help you heal in the process?
The jokes definitely helped me heal. The jokes and just, I call it finding the funny inside the pain.
Mhm.
And that's what I started to do, because at first I was getting really angry. I found myself getting really angry after Dawn's death, and not angry at anything in particular, but just angry that it happened.
Mhm.
And angry that, why am I 39 and widowed, and why didn't he get to live longer? And, he deserves so much more, and just that kind of anger.
Yeah.
And why didn't we get our dreams and our future? And, this is horrible. Like, I can't believe this is happening. And I would get angry at the comments people would make, he's in a better place. It was God's plan, that kind of stuff. And so I decided to take those comments and turn them into, talking about my reaction, like what I wish I could say back to them and things like that, and making that the joke. And so those were kind of my first jokes, is talking about those comments that people make and what I wish I could say back, but don't.
So if
And,
I were to say to you right now, and you're going through this, Dawn's in a better place, what would you say back? I want to hear it.
What I would like to say back, but I wouldn't. But what I would like to say back in fantasy world is, if it's such a great place, then why don't you go there? Let's pack your bag. Let's pack you a suitcase, and we'll send you on a one-way trip to this wonderful place that you love so much. And I'll take my husband back, please. Thank you very much.
I can see that. Wow, that's great. That's great. What about the woman that said to you, and that right there was funny within itself. You grieve today, you find a man tomorrow.
Right.
That's pretty funny right there. You wouldn't have to elaborate on that. What would you have liked to have said to her in a totally different world?
Just tomorrow? Like that seems extremely soon to me. Like, you're really telling me that tomorrow I should be done grieving? And not only should I be done grieving, but I should just start dating and find another man? Like, he wasn't a library book. I'm not just going to go get another one,
I can see how that can make you, we say the darndest things. And what it is that we feel awkward. And I remember one year, it was in 2015, I believe, we lost both my brother-in-law and my father-in-law the same year. So my mother-in-law had 64 years with this man.
Wow.
And my brother-in-law was, I think, 54 at the time, 54, 56 at the time. I can't remember the exact how old he was. And I remember I used to be a correspondent for the Florida Today newspaper, which is USA Today, Florida Today. And I wrote an article embracing loss during the holidays, and I sent it to my mother-in-law. And one of the things that I had suggested is to leave a place at the table, because especially in the holidays, it's so awkward that person's not there. Have a
Right.
picture. If you wanted, if dancing was his thing, dance. If talk to him every night. So my mother-in-law still talks to my father-in-law every night, and I think she's the most she's like superhero.
I love it.
She's just an amazing woman. So what would you say are some of the things that you were able to do, or to help others understand that they need to be able to be comfortable with what the circumstance and be able to talk about it? So how do you get people to shift? Like, I don't want to talk
Yeah.
about it. I don't want to hurt you. I don't want you
Yeah.
to cry. How do you shift that?
It's hard. It's not easy to shift that because, change doesn't happen overnight, right? So it takes a long time to change, but it's little by little, person by person, and, changing one mind at a time. So the biggest thing I would say is to just tell people because they don't know. So for example, if you want to talk about, if you're widowed and you want to talk about the person that died on Thanksgiving Day, and you're with your family and nobody's saying anything about that person, and it's awkward, acknowledge it, bring it up. It has to be up to us, I think, sometimes, unfortunately, to be the ones to say, you know what, I would like very much if you guys would talk about, the fact that Don's not here this year and it's really weird. Let's talk about that. Let's make a toast to him. Let's say that
Exactly.
this is really weird. Let's tell stories about him. Let's acknowledge it together, because this is really strange and really weird, and we're all feeling it. And it's really odd to not talk about it. And, I remember my family saying to me, well, we don't want to upset you. And I was like, well, every moment of the day is upsetting right now. You don't need to remind me that he's dead. I know that every minute of the day, believe me. So you're not reminding me of anything. And what's upsetting is you not talking about it. What's upsetting is you ignoring it and acting like he didn't exist. That's very, very upsetting and very hurtful. And I think most people who have lost someone feel that way, but they just don't say it out loud. And then they feel so alone in their grief because nobody's talking about it. Nobody's acknowledging it. Nobody's saying anything to them because they don't know what to say and they're afraid to say the wrong thing. And so I think if we just acknowledge it, it's such a simple thing. Just acknowledge it. Acknowledge the weirdness, acknowledge the strangeness, acknowledge the sorrow, and tell a few stories and kind of get through those moments together.
I like that. I remember my friend Cindy, going back to the story I told you about Lennon. I remember after that incident where I was just blown away how she became my teacher in her darkest moment. It
Right.
was so beautiful. And I couldn't even speak. And I
Yeah.
think that was the best thing that I did, was not speak. We just looked at each other. We both cried. We both hugged each other. And that right there, I think, spoke volumes, and how sad I was for her and how sad she was. And we said nothing. We just hugged each other. I couldn't speak. So what are some of the things that people should say?
Yeah.
What people can say that wouldn't be demeaning or disrespectful, or
Right.
what are some of the things that you suggest?
So there's a few. So basically what you just said is perfect. Sometimes you don't have to say anything. You could just sit with the person, just hold their hand, just give them a hug, just sit with them in their pain and allow them to feel their pain. That's one of the biggest things we can do, and not many people are capable of it. Most people will try and fix you and try and fix the thing, and this can't be fixed. It just can't. You have to feel it. You have to process through it. You have to feel the hurt, and you have to grieve. And so we have a society that's so uncomfortable with all of that we try and rush people through it. So if you can just sit with someone in their grief and let them feel it and let them take the lead on what comes next, I think that's the best thing. But some things you could say, like actually say, that I found helpful when I heard them. My best friend said to me, she said this, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea how to help you, but I'm here and I'm not going anywhere, and I love you. And that was so helpful because she just again acknowledged that she doesn't know what to do, she doesn't know what to say, and that she might screw it up, but she's here. Oh, and she also said, if I screw it up, please tell me. If I say something that's offensive, please tell me.
What a great friend.
Amazing, and that was so helpful because that opens the door for me to know that she's okay with me talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing you can do is, if you didn't know the person that died, ask about them. Ask the person who is left behind about them. Say, oh, tell me about your brother who died. Tell me a story about him, or that kind of thing. If you did know the person that died, you can share a memory or a story that that person might not know about them. That's really great. I love when I hear stories about my husband that died that I've never heard before, or I meet somebody that knew him before I did, that maybe knew him as a child or a teenager, or when he was in the Air Force very young, because I didn't know him then. So I love hearing anytime there's a story about him, especially a new story, that's new to me. So that's something people can do, is to share stories forward, or to just say something kind about the person who died, to tell them, that you saw how much they loved you, things like that. Or he would be so proud of you. That's a great comment. Anything that's just real and that's not trying to fix the situation and that's just honest is such a good thing to say.
Nice. It's a great words of wisdom. And what about that last comment? He not that he's in God's plan. It was part of God's plan. What would you have liked to have said to that person?
Really? God's plan? He's quite a planner there. I mean, the part where I have post-traumatic stress disorder for the rest of my life, the part where I was, woke up by a ringing phone, the part where he collapsed on a PetSmart floor on a cold, hard floor and had a heart attack, that's all part of the plan. What does that have to do with God's great plan for life? I just found it such a ridiculous thing that's a crappy plan.
No, yeah. If I were God, I would do it that way. But unfortunately, we're not. So, right. But those are, it's great to hear this, because now we're getting a different perspective. Many years ago, before it happened to me, I would have said things that were said to me. So sure. I had a sense of forgiveness, but I had a miscarriage between my first and third child. I had a miscarriage. And I remember people saying to me, oh, you're young, you can have another one. It's like me telling my mom, I know dad died, but you can go get another one.
Right.
Right. So that's how I realized how insensitive I was when I said those things out of my own awkwardness. And I remember, of all my friends, I remember somebody in my family said to me, oh, get over it. That was a bad sperm and an egg. It did not, and I'm like, what?
Oh,
this is my baby. It was 9 weeks old baby. It's like, I couldn't understand how, that whole idea and like, oh, just, no big, just sweep it under the rugs. No big deal.
Just get over it.
It was just a period, And so I realized at that time how insensitive I had been prior to that moment. It took me going through it, just like it took you going through it, to understand how insensitive, because I'm sure if you look back at your life, maybe some of those things you would have thought or done or anything like that. Maybe not, I don't know, because you were so young, you didn't know people that may have died at that point. But, now you look back and I look back at that moment. I was 25 or so at that moment. And I was thinking, wow, or maybe 26. I'm like, wow, I can't believe I did this. One friend sent me a sympathy card. I remember that.
Wow.
That I was so grateful for. She treated it like a death, a sympathy card. And so, we send sympathy cards for people that we know that they die and we don't, but for a miscarriage, wow. Well,
And that's the thing, things like miscarriages and infertility and things like that are such, I guess, invisible losses, they're sometimes called, right? Where they're not recognized in the same way as, by society, as the death of a spouse or a child, or, that type of thing, even though it is the death of a child, but it's different in people's eyes, I guess. And so they say horribly insensitive things. And I think we are coming a long way slowly as a society, but I think it is getting a little better. And there's more discussions like the one we're having right now that are out there, which I think is great. But it's a slow change.
Well, you're paving the way. I
I
remember,
hope so.
yeah, you're paving the way. And I remember seeing your video going, wow. Yeah, I think I said that. I think I was
Yeah.
awkward. And, being able to, write the article and or experience the deaths, because
Yeah.
we have a lot of longevity in our family. So as a child and an adult, there wasn't a lot of death experience for us. And so you just don't know what to say. And a fixer-upper, I'm a great fixer-upper. I work hard so you don't have to.
Right.
That's kind of my personality, like scrubbing bubbles.
Yeah.
I absolutely wanted to fix their pain, and
Yep.
we cannot fix the pain. And
No.
so, yeah, it's just the way it is. And so before we go on to talk about what people can do themselves to kind of help them get over the grief, I mean, I know that you were laughing, you use your laughter and your skills to tell a story, and theatrical to be able to tell a story or a joke and not burst into tears.
Right.
But some people may not have that skill. So before we start talking about that, I want to let you guys know, if you're interested in following Kelley Lynn, if you're a subscriber to whenyouneedafriend.com, you already have all her information. And so all you have to do, if you're not a subscriber, is subscribe. Go to the home page. There's an orange bar right underneath it in the little white section. Just put your name and then confirm that you did subscribe. Not that I'm a spammer or anything, but you still need to confirm. And then you'll start getting our weekly blogs that will tell you who's going to be the teacher in the classroom. While you're at whenyouneedafriend.com, please like and follow me on all social media, including BitChute and Odyssey, and share with your friends. That's the best way that you can help the classroom, is to share, to give us comment, because we do need to go beyond the algorithms that are trying to keep this information out. But I know that you guys are an amazing, smart group of people that love to dance and will share the information. So while you're there and at that whenyouneedafriend.com, check out my sponsors, support my sponsors the way they're supporting the classroom. And then you can also go to my little shop now bag, where you can find discounts and all the different Lilly approved products. And some of these, when you click on it, some of them are affiliate pages that will help give a little bit to the classroom, not that much, but just a little bit. But if you want to help, that's another way. And then you get something out of it. And last but not least, you can become an enrolled student in the classroom. And you can either give $1 or $1,000, whatever you can do, a month or one-time effect, or every monthly, or you can just give of your time, your talent, your treasure, whatever you can do to help grow the classroom. Example, right underneath, if you're watching live right now, please go ahead and find that little share button on Facebook and on YouTube, and share the show, share the class, so that others can learn and grow with us. Today we have Kelley Lynn, and the way she spells her name is Kelley. So her website is kelleylynnlife.com. But again, if you're a subscriber, you have that information right with you. And so I want to thank you, Kelley, for being bold and brave to talk about your experience, especially death, because so many of us are afraid of death that we don't even want to acknowledge it in the lives of others, let alone in our life as well. Right. So thank you so much for being brave and bold to bring our attention and our awareness to this topic.
Oh, you're very welcome. I that's my goal. I hope to make the topic of death less awkward, and to change the conversation surrounding grief and loss. Really.
Yes. And if, by the way, if you guys have a question or if you want to make a comment about someone you lost, go ahead and share. You can share in the comment section, share their name, and make sure that we acknowledge them today. You can acknowledge them if you're watching later on. Share your loved one's name, or if you have a question, type in a Q and write your question down. So the next thing is coping. You turn to a skill that you had to cope. And so what are other things that people can do to cope?
So I don't think it's a good idea for anybody to go through this alone. So the biggest thing is to find a tribe, find a community for whatever you're going through, whatever type of loss you're going through, find other people going through a similar thing and get with those people, because those people have saved my life over and over again in many, many, many ways. The other widowed people I have met in the past 11 years since my husband's death have just given me new life in so many ways, because you see somebody else going through, oh, this person lost their husband too, and here she is she's still living, she's still breathing. Look at all the things she's done with her life in the past 5 years since her loss. Maybe I can do it too. And you start becoming friends with people like this, and they become, your new family in a way. And it's not just about the grief that you share together, but it becomes about your life in the aftermath of that grief. And so a community, a sense of community is number one, I would say. Other than that, I think writing can help greatly. Even if you're not a writer, it doesn't matter. Just writing something down, your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions in a journal, in letters to the person you lost. I did that myself for a long time. I would write letters. I called them Dear Dead Husband letters. And I would just say, Dear Dead Husband. And I would just write whatever was on my mind. Today is really hard, and I don't know how I'm going to do this without you, and this stinks, and whatever I wanted to say. And it made me feel better. It kind of released all those emotions, but it also documented what I was going through, and then you can look back at that, 6 months later, 2 years later, 5 years later, and you can see how far you've come, because you don't always see it as you're going through it. You think, I'm not doing this right. I'm not grieving right. Why is this taking so long? Why is this still so painful? But the truth is, it just is. It takes as long as it takes, and it takes quite a long time to get out of that raw pain, and you have to process through those emotions. So writing is a great way to do that.
Good. Anything else?
Those are the two big things: community, writing, and take the help. Take the help that's offered, because a lot of people won't help or won't offer help. But if there's help offered, try to put your pride away and take the help, because like I said, you can't do this alone, and you shouldn't have to. And, whether it's somebody offering to take you out for dinner, whether it's a friend offering to do your laundry for you, or to, watch your kids if you have kids, or, whatever it is, take the help.
Yeah. And, I would say also, I would add to that, practice self-care.
Yes.
Practice self-care, because sometimes we say, oh, I'm okay, I'm fine, I'm okay. And they're not. They need to get out there and give themselves the love that they want their spouse to give them, or give themselves that love, and fall in love with yourself as well. I mean, I think I would think that would be so important. I've looked at my mother-in-law and how she has, after 64 years, she's still the volunteer of the year.
That's amazing.
90 years old.
Wow.
Like I said, my superhero. And she is she's from Rhode Island, and she has a knitting club, and they knit for people who are homeless, and little baby outfits for little crack babies, or babies that are premature. I don't know exactly. I hope I'm not saying the wrong thing, but I know that they have a Christmas party, and they donate these blankets that they create for the homeless, for all these different organizations. And she's still doing this, and at the age of 90. So I think that she has taught me. She's been a great teacher of mine of what to do, because a lot of people, when you said, when you were going to this support group, some people want to to stay in the grief and find that commonality. But I love when you said, and not just the grief, but the way
Right.
we're going to live our life. That's
Yeah.
so crucial. Would you like to add any more about that? Because, people do end up finding someone. Some people find someone in the future, like that wise woman told you the day after your,
Right.
your husband. But
Right.
would you like to share the beyond, especially when you're younger?
Absolutely. So yeah, I was 39 when my husband died, and it took a lot of time to get to a place where I wanted to think about tomorrow again, because I was in so much pain for such a long time. And when you're in that raw pain at first, it is really, really hard. And that's why it's so important to process through it. I believe you have to process through it. You have to talk about it, whether it's with a counselor, with friends, with other people going through the same thing. You have to do that in order for those feelings to start shifting and those emotions to start shifting into something, a little more hopeful and positive. And once that happens, and you're not in that deep grief anymore, you're in, there's always going to be grief. It shifts. It doesn't go away, but it shifts greatly when you do the work. And what you said early on in this conversation is so true, that time doesn't do anything. It's what you do with the time. And so once you're sort of making those shifts, then you can start asking yourself the questions about, well, what do I want now? What do I want my life to look like today? What kind of things bring me joy today? And those things may be very different, especially with the loss of a partner or spouse, because so much of who you are is attached to that person and, your life with that person. And so now you have to really look at, well, what do I want now? That person is no longer here. I can carry them with me in whatever way I want, and they can be a part of my life forever. But what do I want? What do I want to make my life into? And so, carrying those people that helped you through that loss, like other widowed people in my case, has been amazing, because they have been such a part of celebrating the victories as well as the grief. And I am remarried, by the way. So yes. I did remarry in 2020, and I met a wonderful man named Nick, and we met online as well. And and he is extremely understanding of my love for Dawn. He understands that my love for Dawn is what made me the woman I am today, that he now loves. And so it's sort of all connected. And in my mind, it's a beautiful thing to have these two great love stories, one who is not on earth anymore and one who is. And it's really a lovely, lovely thing. And I believe the heart expands and love grows love, and you can love and multiply it when you choose to share it forward.
Yeah. And just because you love someone new doesn't mean you love somebody less.
Correct. Exactly.
Isn't there room in our heart to love just so many? And I learned that when I had my second child, when I had when my youngest child was born, and I had my other daughter, my daughter, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I could love both of them just as much. Yeah. Well, so our room, there's so much room in our heart for love, and that doesn't mean you love one person less, right?
Correct. You love them both, and you love them differently. Each relationship is so different. Each relationship we have in our life is so different and unique, like snowflakes, they're all unique, but they really are. They're unique. And so, I wouldn't want to ever replicate what I had with Dawn again. Why would I want that again? That's our thing that we had and that we will always have. And now I have a thing with Nick, and we'll always have that, and that's our thing. So
that's wonderful.
The heart is capable of expanding love and growing love, and it's such a beautiful thing when you look at it that way and when you really feel it that way, because you don't ever have to subtract anything from your heart. You're just adding.
That's right. When I was researching you, I thought, oh, she's remarried. That's really good, because I was looking at your website and your Facebook page, and I thought, oh, this is a great segue, because there's men tend to marry within 2 years. And this is what I've learned as a coach and coaching people, but women sometimes don't marry. don't
Right.
remarry. They feel that their girlfriends are good enough. And sometimes
Yeah.
I can understand because our girlfriends do fill our hearts in so many different ways. So
Yep.
what do you say to someone, a family member that maybe their mother passed away and their father is now maybe a year later dating again? How to get over it? Just get over it. The child.
Get
How
get
to
over the
get
fact that he's dating again.
correct. How do you,
Yeah.
because the children will hold like you don't, how could you move on? And I've seen problems with, especially
Yeah.
with men dating because their children are still honoring the life of the mother.
Sure. I would say
Difficult.
to them that your father or anyone is capable of still honoring the love he has for your mother and going forward in his life and experiencing more love. And also that the love story that those two people had is forever. It's eternal and it doesn't stop. It just shifts into something else. And it's because of that love that he now wants more love in his life. It's because of that love, it's honoring that love and the beauty of that love that you want more love. So if you have a relationship that is a beautiful thing and you love it and you love being in that relationship, you're going to want more of that feeling. He doesn't want to be their father doesn't want to be alone forever,
Yeah.
and nobody wants to be alone. We need each other. We need human beings, and it's a different relationship. So the fact that their father is now with someone new does not erase anything with their mother. It honors their mother in a way because it's
Yeah.
expanding that love and it's expanding the joy and the beauty of the fact that we do love as human beings. What is life without love?
Yeah. And if we as the children don't release our parents to start dating again and create
Yep.
loneliness attributes to 45% of premature death or early death. Loneliness. We want people to not, because if as
Yeah.
a child, if you're throwing a tantrum saying you can't love anybody else, you can only love my mom, or my dad can only love, or you can only love my dad, then
Right.
we're pushing them to an early death.
Yeah, and depression. Loneliness is such a high contributor to depression. People don't like being lonely. I never thought I would be with someone else after Dawn died. I was one of those people that said, I won't date again. I'm not interested. Don't even talk to me about it. For 5 years, I did not date. I didn't kiss anyone. I didn't do anything, nothing. I wasn't interested. And then I started to get lonely around the 5-year mark. I started to get lonely and I started to think, I'm in my mid 40s and this is not good. I don't want to be alone forever, and I that's how it started. I didn't want to be alone.
I totally get it. I totally
Yeah.
get it. I mean, I don't know what you went through. And just
Right.
like your friend said, I have no idea what to say or what to do. But just know that I'm here for you. I love
Yeah.
that advice.
Yeah.
And so I can say I hear you and I understand, but really I haven't gone through what you've gone through. And I love the fact that you are brave enough that God picked you to share from, is you're using your skills to
Yeah.
go beyond what you were trained for classically as an actor or a comedian or whatever. It's just like I was saying the other day, I started with a mic as a singer,
Yep.
and now it's about telling truth. So sometimes we take our skills and we one up it to that next level when
Yep.
we grow deeper. So good on you. Good job for doing that. So
Thank you.
if there is somebody that's walking in right now and just tuning in, what would you say to them is the most important thing about embracing grief?
That you should embrace it. And I know that sounds weird, but you should embrace your grief instead of running away from it, instead of saying, oh, why am I crying so much? Why am I not better by now? Why am I still feeling in so much pain? It's all part of the process, and it needs to happen. Those feelings, those emotions, they need to come out. They need to be processed through in order for you to start healing, in order for you to shift into something that will make your life more joyful and will make your life better and more positive and hopeful. In order to get there, you have to process through it. So if you're sitting in a puddle crying and crying and crying and you can't stop, it's okay. That's what's supposed to happen. It really is that painful for a long time. And if you process through it and you let that happen, you'll be okay. I promise you, you'll be okay.
And kudos to Nick that he's able to be aware that you had a life before him and he's still good. And I know we have about a minute left, but I just want to, well, we don't have a minute left, I guess, with the music we do, but I just want to say thank you for now you're ready to dance some more. Yeah, I hear you now. I'm so grateful for you. And thank you so much for what you're doing. It's so special that you're helping people along the way laugh during tragic moments. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. And please remember, we'll be right here waiting for you worldwide at whenyouneedafriend.com. This is Lillian McDermott and Kelley Lynn wishing you love, peace, joy, and unexpected abundance. Make it the best day ever! I knew you'd be the best ever.
The opinions and advice expressed on the Lillian McDermott radio show are intended for the individual callers and guests on the program and are presented to our wider audience solely for general educational purposes. Please act responsibly and consult personally with your own medical, psychological, or nutritional expert before taking any steps to improve your life.
Okay. So this was a question I wanted to ask you, but I guess we're just going to do it during the Teacher's Pet Corner. I just need a little bit more of your time. So here's the deal. I know someone who's dating a widower, a guy. Yeah. And every time we are together, that person speaks more about their deceased spouse. And it's to the point where I feel like I know their deceased spouse more than I know the person he's with now.
Right.
And I don't know if I could be with somebody who's constantly comparing me to their deceased spouse. Right. Any words of wisdom for men or women who are now in a new relationship and how much they should talk about their their deceased spouse, not ex. Right. Big difference between having an ex-husband.
There is.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I learned the hard way.
Yeah, he's not my ex, he's my late spouse. Yes.
That's right. I remember calling somebody single and she goes, I'm not single, I'm widowed.
You're widowed,
and I went, oh, okay. Yeah. You know, it's like people are teachers everywhere. We all learn from each other. So what advice would you tell somebody who is a widow or widower? I don't know if there's a difference for men and women. Yeah,
there is. Widowers are male and widows are women.
Okay, thank you for that. I thought so, but I wasn't sure. So if either a widow or widower is now in a new relationship, constantly talking about their deceased spouse, what is your words of wisdom for someone who is now beginning to date and now is now remarried, or when it comes to mentioning their deceased spouse?
So are you looking for advice for the non-widowed person who's dating that widowed person?
No, the widowed person, because I would think we already talked about how the person that is the non-widowed has room. They have to be special. They have to be able to be okay with that. And you may want to address both. Go ahead and address both. Yeah, they do have to be okay with that. But I would say, I don't know this individual situation as well as you do, obviously, but I would say that if the widowed person is talking about their deceased partner that much, then maybe they're not ready to date. Maybe they may not be ready. Because if they're constantly talking about that other person and they're not focused on the current relationship, if that's what you're saying, I would say that that's a potential issue and that they may not be ready yet to put their heart into this relationship, and that's okay, but maybe they want to take their time with that relationship, that new relationship. Maybe they want to slow it down a little bit. Maybe they want to, find ways to stay more in the current conversation and find things about the person they're with, their new partner, to
to speak about. You know, I mean, I would never ask anybody to not speak about their person that died.
Correct. Yeah.
But
Like,
I do think that, you know, it can be too much. You know, I think if it's happening that often, it might be a situation where they're not ready.
Very good. So
You know,
keep that in mind. If somebody says something to you, you can mention it, and then that if they continue on and on and on and on and on, perhaps maybe there is an issue there. So I love the advice. You know, maybe you're not ready to date just yet, maybe. And so the person that is with the person that is the new person in their life, then they just need to be aware that if it bothers them, they need to speak up, right?
Yes, absolutely. That partner should feel
just
like
tone
they can
it down.
speak up. Yeah. Yeah. Can you just tone
just a little,
just 4%, tone it down a little bit and focus on us here. Here I am. I'm right here.
Do a little pig line, ixnay on this. Just don't do that. But I'm so grateful to you. This has been a great conversation. I hope that for those of you who are still watching, make sure you share it, and especially with someone that has lost somebody and it's recent. The holidays are around the corner, and at least we know how we can be support of somebody else. So thank you so much, Kelley, for being in today's conversation. I really appreciate you.
I appreciate you as well. Thank you.
Thank you. See you guys. Thank you for